Hey everybody, I'm Kathleen, and the keyword I'll be focusing on is Tuck and Wang's at-risking Indigenous peoples. So this project is targeted at Renfrew County, which is the county where I grew up, with a goal to educate county members, as over time, a number of white European descendants in the county have claimed Indigenous status because they have distant ancestors with some Indigenous heritage. Many of these people have claimed status for the benefits that come with it, but have not claimed any other part of the culture. This is an issue because non-Indigenous people are claiming status and abusing the system. In this presentation, I will be discussing Tuck and Wang's 6 settler moves to innocence, but I'm going to be focusing primarily on at-risking Indigenous peoples. There are many reasons why a non-Indigenous individual might claim status. Some have done it to move towards innocence through an attempt of settler nativism. This is essentially when a white person with a very distant Indigenous ancestor claims status. At-risking is another attempt to move towards settler innocence. At-risking is essentially when settlers continuously represent Indigenous peoples as always at risk and vulnerable or self-destructive. These ideologies have been reproduced by white people in Renfrew County, and some of these same people who reproduce these stereotypes have claimed Indigenous status to receive the benefits. These people justify their actions by saying Indigenous peoples don't deserve the benefits because of those same stereotypes society has forced upon them. An example of at-risking is when white members of the community represent Indigenous peoples as at risk or self-destructive. There are stereotypes the dominant class reinforces about Indigenous peoples, like, for example, saying Indigenous people are lazy or don't work or they get everything paid for. White people in the county showcase these ideologies when talking about Indigenous status and the benefits that come with it. Many members think Indigenous peoples are not deserving of these benefits because of these stereotypes. Some of these same people use these ideologies to justify why they would claim Indigenous status when they themselves do not identify as Indigenous. These people essentially say Indigenous peoples don't deserve the benefits because of the stereotypes society has forced upon them. They have a mindset that if Indigenous peoples do nothing to get these benefits, then I should get them too. In reality, a lot of these people don't understand what Indigenous status means and what the benefits actually are that come with having this status. So here's an infographic I made for members of Renfrew County. I used the county's official colors, hoping it could be used as an official county document that residents can refer back to. It analyzes and argues some common stereotypes and ideologies used in the county regarding Indigenous peoples and the benefits that come with Indigenous status. So at the top, I wrote a quick description of Tuck and Wang's term, followed by a description of the settler guilds going on in Renfrew County. You'll see on the left-hand side, I talk about the stereotypes and misinformation regarding Indigenous status, and on the right-hand side, the actual facts and realities that go with these stereotypes. So number 1 says, Indigenous peoples don't pay taxes. On the right-hand side, you'll see that Indigenous peoples are subject to the same tax laws as everyone else, but Indigenous peoples with status are only eligible for tax exemption under Section 87 of the Indian Act. Number 2 says that Indigenous people get free education when in reality, students with Indigenous status can apply for financial aid for post-secondary education, but it's not guaranteed. Number 3 says Indigenous peoples get free housing. On the right-hand side, you'll see that there are government housing programs that help Indigenous communities, just like how there is housing programs that help non-Indigenous communities. Government housing isn't just specifically for Indigenous people. Number 4 says Indigenous communities get special services, when in reality, only reserves under the Indian Act can receive special education, health, and housing services, but it should be noted that non-Indigenous communities receive all of these services as well. Number 5, Indigenous peoples have enough land, when in reality of Canada's 9.985 million square kilometers, Indigenous reserve land accounts for just 0.2%. And finally, a big stereotype is Indigenous peoples are lazy and receive handouts, when in reality, settlers use these ideologies to represent Indigenous peoples as at risk and to free themselves of settler guilt. We need to encourage Indigenous peoples to claim status and to claim their culture while discouraging non-Indigenous people from doing so. In order for this to happen, settlers need to be aware of these kinds of concepts and understand where their ideologies come from. Communication is the best way to solve these issues. More conversations regarding these concepts will help encourage Indigenous peoples to claim their status and culture while educating settlers on what this really means and why this is so important. If educated, then settlers will understand that these so-called benefits really are minuscule in comparison to what the Indigenous peoples of Canada have been through and continue to go through every day. Thanks, everybody.